Hey everyone, it's Kong. Welcome to Ancient Beckoning School featuring Professor Qtaru. This is the lecture on Sleipnir, the third boss in the Ancient Beckoning cycle. The horse boss. The horse. In this lesson, Professor Q is going to cover basic strategy and approach to the boss, as well as several alternative characters you can use if you don't have some of the specific heroes he uses in these demos. One thing to note, if you're used to normal Kong videos, which are short and snappy and straight to the point, this video is long. Personally, I recommend watching the whole thing because there are lots of little nuggets of wisdom scattered throughout, but I do understand not everyone has an hour and a half to set aside to watch someone walk through and explain a whole battle. So, to give you a little bit more freedom and flexibility, I have included some pretty detailed timestamps in the description below, and you can also see them along that little timer bar at the bottom of the video. So consume at your leisure and enjoy. Let's jump right into the lesson.
My knowledge of Norse mythology mostly comes from Marvel movies, so I'm not a reliable source.
Definitely a lot of fun stuff to work with there.
Anyway, big gains I had today. I started today with 14 million, and then Burn hit 6 stars. And now we're at 18 million. So this is the party that I used. As you can see, lots of the same characters being used in a lot of these parties. Alright, so I'm going to show you my characters I used. Alright, Light of Genesis. She kind of has a strange build here. Like 3C and Holy Light teleport are the skills I used. And I went with Mistletoe for the damage reduction, so I kind of reduced her output a little bit in terms of like damage output to increase the whole team's survivability. That ended up making a big difference in the long run. And for the rest of the enchants, I went Clock mostly because Clock's what I have mage gear of that's fairly bulky. Because this boss has very high attack, so it's pretty important that your units are able to survive as long as possible. It was pretty late in the fight. He would attack with 100% HP and like survive with just a few thousand. So having a lot of HP and defense was really helpful. Albedo, I went with a you want to steal build. And HP is the most helpful. Defense helps out a little bit, but HP helps out more because your goal with the tank is to stack as much damage reduction as possible. So that's why I have Gaia's helmet for the physical damage taken reduction, as well as the steal. So you've got 20% there. Then from the talent, there's another 25%, so there's 45%. Then Albedo has 3 chances to trigger extra damage reduction. So from the equipment, I use Bloodline Magic Armor, which has a 30% chance to lower damage taken by 30%. Then I also use this block skill to do basically the same thing. And then her 3C also does the same thing, except the 3C damage reduction is 50%. For her final skill, I brought Attack Intimidate to be a consistent source of attack down. And it's basically important that your DPS units that don't have the ability to innately move again on their own wear Spirit Boots in this fight. Because there's a phase in this fight where you cannot end with your characters in a straight line from the boss. So you have to be at a diagonal angle or else it'll kill you. Right, Bernhardt. As always, for infantry, Crystal Stinger is the cutting edge of technology. Besides that, I went Breeze just for the extra 10% damage, and I had some pretty good enchants. I kind of went a little bit more on the HP side with him than pure attack. And this enchant's okay, it's not particularly great. I wouldn't say this was the greatest burn ever, but he's freshly 6 stars, and he did really well. In terms of skills, I brought Rupture for the extra fixed damage, Hegemony for the defense down, then Sunshade for some passive healing, and also just the fact that he doesn't really have anything else useful to bring. Right, so that should be number 3, I think. Right. Number 4, we have Rosalia. I went 2+2 on her. That way I could mix in some of my best enchants, like this Frostrend, along with this Giant's Resolve and this Fury of Tyr with a lot of attack on it, as well as a nice Slayer's Emblem. Rosalia is she gets some damage reduction from her talent as well as attack and defense, and I find that makes her pretty tanky to the point where she doesn't have to have like HP and defense on all her enchants, and you can focus more on offensive stats. All right, for her skills, I bring the 1C sword. And then I bring these 2 attacks because that way, when you use these attacks and you're in the range of the sword aura, she can move again 3 spaces, like Leon, and that allows her to attack on the even phases without needing to be using Spirit Boots and losing some base attack that way. Next up, we have Leon. I went with a straight full moon set here. So I stole Landius's sword there. Got nice high attack mirror armor with some HP. Some good attack and defense on this tier. Also some more, little bit of HP and high attack on the accessory. He's also fairly decently tanky because his talent provides a lot of extra defense when he attacks. For his skills, you bring Chivalry and these 2 skills because they have low cooldowns. Finally, we have Rosenseal. Now, Iris used to be the healer that everyone used for this fight, but you could say Rosenseal has sort of crystallized the healer meta.
Got him.
She basically replaces the role that both Iris and Olivia used to play. So, run her with Crystal for the maximum healing. She has in her talent some AoE damage reduction, so I don't think she actually needs as much HP as I put on her, and she might be better with... I mean, the int on this set is not bad, but I think it would actually be better for her to go with like a straight up full int set. Like if I had like a 5% int without HP, that might actually be better than this here, because I never felt while fighting that she was in danger from any damage that she took during the fight. So I think maybe just prioritizing max int for her set might be a little bit better. In terms of mass crystal healing is very important, and occasionally you'll need the single target heal, and she's also a miracle worker. All right, so I think it's time to show you sort of how the fight works.
All right.
All right, I guess I could have mentioned a little bit more about troops. One of the big pluses that Albedo brings as a tank, besides a lot of chances to trigger extra damage reduction, are these Hellhound troops, just like Juggler does on a lot of the other fights. This gives you a guaranteed damage increase, and it increases the DPS of all your other units. It's also important that your tank be the first character here. Like, I mean, the very upper left unit. You don't want to start it like this. You want to make sure your tank is in this spot. Because Sleipnir actually targets specifically the character in this spot with its skills.
Interesting little AI quirk.
Aside from that, just in general, this isn't limited to like only these units, but other units you may be using as well, like if you're using Luna. Cavalry troops in general are the most effective here. So Heaven's Guard is the best Rosalia has. And I know a lot of people seem to like running Royal Cavalry on Leon because they don't take a lot of damage. But in actual fact, Bone Dinos do a lot more damage, and Leon still survives just fine. So Bone Dinos are way, way better. So let's get started. So usually you have Albedo open up. Just to get the damage buff off. Then usually the next person I attack with is Burn to get the hegemony, minus 20% defense. And also to get his aura. So between the two of them, it's a total of like a 30% attack reduction, which is pretty big considering with 30% attack reduction, it's still got over 2,000 attack. This boss has, I believe, the highest attack out of any Ancient Beckoning boss, and it scales very quickly. Next, I usually follow up with Rosalia, who is here to prove that the sword is indeed mightier than the pen. Now, the reason why I had Leon start down here in this bottom corner is another part of this fight is that during the odd phases, you have this effect right here where damage dealt is decreased by 60%, and before attacking for every 1 block moved, damage is increased by 20%. I don't know if there's an actual cap on this, but what I can say is that if you move 5 tiles, you definitely do more damage than if you move, say, 3 tiles. So, as often as I can, I try to move the maximum amount possible before attacking on this phase. So, it synergizes very well with the Cav troops tech bonus as well, and also like Leon's own tech bonuses. So that's why I started him down here in the bottom corner, so he gets to move 5 before launching his attack. Alright, next up with Tensei Jess, I use her teleport here just to get her talent stacks built up quicker and get a little bit more int. Now, later on in the fight, her 3C is saved for a specific spot in the fight. But early on, you don't have to worry about it. So you just spam it as much as possible. And there's that nice little damage dealt decrease he gets from the mistletoe staff, which ends up being very important in the long run. And then finally, for this first phase, I ended off with a mass crystal heal. Albedo living up to her name, being very reflective in how much damage she does. Alright, now once you've got the group sort of warped in randomly like this, which the boss does every turn, the next puzzle is figuring out how to move your characters so that you can move them a maximal possible distance before attacking with them. In this case, Rosalia can often actually be helpful because this skill, Silver Spear, can attack at 2 range. So from here, she's able to move the maximum distance of 5 and launch her attack. And as well, that will open up a spot up here for someone else. Now, normally I would like to attack with Burn to get the hegemony defense debuff first. However, because I used Smash the previous turn and that has a 2-turn defense debuff, that actually means I still already have that defense debuff up. So I don't have to worry about that. Now I like moving out here because I'll count the tiles. So I'll count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then I know that I will have the option. It doesn't matter so much when you know the boss is going to be able to AoE and drag you back in again. But this early, this boss is going to be wiped out in the second turn. So this will set Rosalia up to be able to move 5 for the next turn and attack with a 5 range. The next phase doesn't actually have like the extra damage when moving extra tiles, but it still works for the Cav training tech, the Flying Steel Hooves. So I keep doing it anyway. Alright, now at this point, with this open spot, I could move Burn 1 tile, I could move Leon 2 tiles, but Albedo doesn't do that much damage, so it's more efficient to have her take the little bit of a move hit and only move 2 tiles. That way that opens up the spot for Leon to move 4, and then Burn can move 3 and attack. Alright, now this is a case where I want to demonstrate. If you move 3 tiles, you'll be out of the sword's effect range, but you'll gain the 20% damage dealt. So if I stay within the tiles, this is how much damage she does. So that was just over 69,000.
Nice.
But if I move an extra tile and go outside of the sword, it does about 5,000 more damage. So it's a small little optimization to keep in mind for situations like this early on. Then finally, to finish off, I'll probably give an attack with Rosen. Alright, now it's the start of a new phase, so all of its debuffs are gone, so I'm going to open up with Albedo as usual. This phase, like I mentioned, it doesn't have that effect with the extra damage for each tile you move anymore. So it's less important to get the full move in for your characters. But Cav characters will still benefit, or I should say Cav troops will still benefit from fine steel hooves, so don't ignore it entirely.
And this is the phase where you can't end your turn in any cardinal directions from the boss.
Yes, if you leave a character in a straight line from the boss, it will deal this 5 times damage skill with this damage dealt increased by 100%. Now, this damage dealt increased by 100% is another thing that they added at some point. I believe is when they added the Tensei faction to this fight. So when they decide to intensify the damage dealt, because I believe if you used Albedo beforehand and you had like 3C up and you had block and you had the Bloodline magic armor, before there was a chance where you could just have Albedo just stay right next to the boss and just tank the skill. So I believe when they actually designed or decided to add the Tensei faction to this fight, they increased the damage this skill deals. So you can't do that anymore. Right, at this point, it's not technically safe for Rosalia to attack because she doesn't have a form of move again. But I'm going to end up using Tiny Jess to teleport her out. That way, she can get her attack in and still be safe. Now, I can afford to do that on this early phase because my characters are doing so much damage that even if I get the Hunted debuff, I'll still be able to I'll basically be able to ignore that debuff because I'll just take this thing out the next turn anyway. Alright, so now it's Hunted Rosalia. So her sword has come back up, which means it gives her an act again, which will allow this little hunt effect to wear off completely, which means that it will not hunt her down and attack. Also, this sword tile only has 1 turn, so it goes away next turn, so that worked out just fine too. Alright, I'm going to use Smash on the boss now. That way I can use this sword to target its tile location that it moves to. This is one of the things that slightly annoys me about this fight, is when you have Smash Up on this phase, but to take advantage of the maximum damage, you have to hit it somewhere where you might not necessarily want to so much.
Right.
Because you'll get it off this sword tile. So it's good to have this sword come back up so you can reapply it. That way the smash becomes less of a problem. If I attack from here, I'll be able to move 3 and then attack yet again next turn. Right, so Leon can move 4. Bern can move 3. She can move 5. Right. So it looks like we're safe to just attack from right here. Once again, new phase, we're going to open up with Albedo to get the damage debuff. And then next you attack with Bern. Get the minus 20% defense. Then we'll go in with Leon. Here would be good, I think. So. Currently what I'm thinking about right now is we still need to make sure everyone is grouped up in a way where Rosenziel's Mass Crystal Healing will be able to hit everyone. It's not necessary this early in the fight, but it's something to keep in mind, so it's good practice for throughout the rest of the fight. The issue is if I move here, then I block Rosalia from moving 5. If I stay here, I sort of block Tensei Jess from moving 3. If I move anywhere else, it looks like I might not be able to hit everyone with the Mass Crystal Heal. So this early on, it'll actually be worth it to just ignore the Mass Crystal Heal, I guess, on someone. So that's what I'm going to do. But much later in the fight, it's going to become a lot more important to be able to hit everyone with the Mass Crystal Heal. Alright, 3C is up, so I'm going to save it because what I'm going to demonstrate is basically how you would handle a later turn. Like, I don't mean like turn 40 or something, but I mean something like, at least with this party, probably around turn 60, you'd start getting to the point where instead of Mass Crystal Healing, I would actually be using Miracle on this turn, and then I'll start off with a Mass Crystal Heal next turn. Just to have everyone have the extra damage reduction to help survive AoE the boss would do.
Right.
Alright, so supposing this had been a much later turn. Fortunately, the Hellhound debuff lasts for 2 turns, so we already have the damage taken increase. So what I'll do on a later turn is I will activate her 3C instead of attacking. And then I will put Tensei Jessica in a position to be able to use her 3C and make sure to hit Albedo or your tank of choice with the buff it provides. Right, so that gives her an extra 25% damage reduction. And along with the damage dealt decrease of 20% coming from the mistletoe staff, that basically sets Albedo up at, I think, see, she has 25 from talent, 20 from gear plus steel. Then that's 45. It basically sets her up at, I think, 90% damage reduction without any skills proccing. Basically, she was able to survive this big skill here, even at turn 60, without any procs because of that.
Nice. Not having to rely on RNG, always a nice little boost.
Yep. The next thing I'd mention is, like, Tensei Jess was right here, and she had the breeze, so she was able to run across. Otherwise, I would have used her teleport here to be able to get her into sure position to hit that buff on her. Early on, you don't have to worry about that, so you could just move wherever gets you the maximum distance where you can still attack. But the thing is, I have no source of magic defense down right now. If I had built a Sakura sword, it would be possible that someone could hit a magic defense down with that as a debuff on a crit hit. But without it, just having this damage taken debuff is the most damage bonus she's going to get. So it's perfectly fine to use her before you use anyone else in order to clear up her spot so that Burn can come in, get the defense debuff, and then maybe your other units can start attacking. Now here's a position where, like, either Leon or Rosalia would only have the option to move 2 tiles. So that's another situation where it's useful to have Chivalry up. That way, Leon can at least get 3 tiles moving, also refreshes his skill cooldown. And then Rosalia gets to move 4 tiles here. Get a nice 140k crit.
Very nice.
Then Rosalia gets to contribute a little chunk of damage herself. And that's basically how this fight goes. People are probably familiar with this, but I think I'm going to try and demonstrate the L shape.
That's probably a good idea. Yeah. I know people are familiar with it, but a lot of newer players sometimes have trouble visualizing exactly how it works.
I make mistakes too. Generally, this early on, I don't even have to worry about it at all.
Yeah.
Just because I kill it through the turn so fast. If this were a later turn, I knew I wasn't going to be killing this very quickly. This would be a situation in which I would actually save the sword tile for... Actually, I probably want to just use it to refresh cooldowns as quickly as possible. But if this were later on, I would actually choose probably not to attack with Rosalia. That way I could save Tessica's teleport. Alright, now this is a reason where it would have been helpful to actually save the sword. It decided to target Rosalia. So it may have been better to actually save the sword this early on. But I'm going to pretend, for the sake of forming the L, so to speak. So let's see. In this situation, I do not have Smash to move the boss around. So to visualize the L shape, basically where Tiny Jess is going to be the corner. So you're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. You're going to build a wall with characters up there. And then the character that's going to be targeted has to go sort of to be like the fill in the empty corner. So you're going to have a hole here and a hole here, and then you're going to have your targeted character here, and then you're going to have the 5 along here.
Yeah, I sometimes visualize it as an arrow pointing at the boss.
Now, unfortunately, Rosalia in this situation is not able to attack and then retreat far enough. I mean, if I had Smash Up, I could do that, but I don't have Smash Up. So instead, if I felt I was like super duper close, but I knew I wouldn't quite be able to take it out this round, I would actually go for the attack anyway, and then use Tiny Jess to teleport Rosalia back into position. So in any case, with Leon's ability to move 3, he's free to attack. And then he can retreat to form one of the far corners. Right now that she's attacked, I can teleport her into the spot she needs to be. Then just based on the rest of the moves available, this is where Tensei just has to go. No, Abedo could still attack. Then use her own spirit boots. Retreat into this spot. Is that a Sleipnir right here in the background?
That's a Hellhound.
In any case, what's happening here is there's some AI trickery going on. So hopefully I can clock without this being super slow. Alright. Now what the boss is doing is it's calculating how it can hit Rosalia. And basically, due to the shape of the structure, Albedo is actually not important here. This spot, Albedo could be over here. But as long as you have these two sort of walls up here, it'll work. What it's doing is it's calculating what it believes to be the closest tile it can attack Rosalia from. And it calculates that this is the closest tile. So even though it could be attacking her from here or here and moving less, it's going to move to here to attack Rosalia from. Now, the thing it does with this attack when it attacks a hunted person is it starts out with a default plus 100% damage. Sort of distracting that this skill is called Shadow Raid.
Yeah.
But it starts out with a default plus 100% damage, but for each tile it moves before attacking, the damage is reduced by 20% with the maximum of 160% for 8 tiles moved. So with this structure, what you get is it ends up forcing it, due to its silly AI, to move 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And therefore you get the maximum amount of damage reduction.
So as long as you're in proper position on this phase, that attack never becomes a problem, even on later turns?
Pretty much. I think if it were to be a problem, I could have casted Miracle the previous turn, even though it wouldn't have hit everyone. And then that would probably turn it into a non-issue for anyone here.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if it's targeting Albedo, obviously he has innate damage reduction, so that's not going to be a problem. Rosalia, it's also not a problem because of her. She has a 15% damage reduction from her Faith talent. Now, Rosenseal or Tiny Jess, it wouldn't be a problem because of their troops having an innate 30% damage reduction when at max HP from the tech training. So basically, that leaves potentially Bernhardt or Leon vulnerable. But in general, it's not too much of an issue. And if you think it's going to be that much of an issue, it's also possible that you may be able to have Albedo use her 3C tanking skill and then go to one of these corners so that Albedo would actually guard the attack.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that covers basically all the strategies to the fight. It's just being careful. It's generally wise to conserve your actigans instead of using the sword like I did the previous turn. That way, this situation with Rosalia wouldn't have happened, even on a later turn, where I wouldn't be able to kill it in 2 turns. But I think that about covers the fight. Do you have any other questions or things you think I should point out?
No, I think just having Leon's smash and Tiny Jessica's teleport, and then options to act again in case like Rosalia or Leon get hunted, gives you a lot of flexibility with how you deal with this whole hunted phase.
Alright, so I guess we'll go talk about some alternative units then.
Awesome. Yeah, there might be a lot of people who are still maybe not using Albedo or didn't get Albedo and are more familiar with seeing Ultimuller do that job.
Yep, it's interesting. Actually, this fight has well, it's an interesting case where I could say there are 3 tanks who are possibly meta, and it's kind of difficult to know offhand which one is the best or which one is going to be the best for your team comp. So generally, for your tanks, what you want, first of all, is damage reduction. You have basically 4 choices who are really good at that. So there are some optional choices you can use that I'll mention. If you're just heading for S rank, Vargas will work. He'll probably live long enough for you to get the S rank. And Imric can do the job too if you have him with this heavy shield skill. You have him with steel equipment, the Gaia's helm. He has innate move again, so he actually gets to wear this amulet for an extra 10% damage reduction as well. And he also gets to bring royal calves. So those 2 are usable for S rank, but I don't really recommend using them as your main tank. There is a tank who is somewhat better than them that I don't really have built up, who's consistently got a good amount of damage reduction, and that's Elucia. At 6 stars, I believe her talent gives her an innate 20% reduced physical damage. And she also can wear light armor, so she can wear Last Rites. So there's an innate 60%, which becomes 70% with Steel Enchant. And then I believe these Tidal Elves would be pretty good, because with her unique equipment, whenever the boss attacks her, it's going to give her water. So the Tidal Elves, they deal magic damage, and I believe Sleipnir has lower magic defense than physical defense. Oh, she also brings Hellhound, so actually, I didn't even realize that. So if you're using her as your tank, Hellhounds for the debuff would actually be her best choice to increase the rest of your team's DPS. And then, of course, she's going to want Spirit Boots because she doesn't really have an innate source of act again, or move again, I should say. So I'd say Alucia is a tier above, like, Vargas or Emmerich or Serena. Well, I guess I could mention Serena. She's usable as well, but I think she's going to be one of those characters that it's rare to have built.
Right.
And also, she's not really that great. She doesn't have much damage output. As far as her soldier choices go, I guess Zealots would be her best offensive choice. Well, Amazon Champions would actually probably be better because they have higher base stats by a little bit, and they also have a chance of giving the defense down. And they also have plus 30% damage when counterattacking. So I know it's kind of a toss-up which would be better between Zealots or Amazon Champions, in my opinion. But she has like an innate 30% damage reduction. She has this block skill. The thing she doesn't have is she doesn't have... Oh, she does have Bloodline. So, yeah, I guess she could wear Bloodline magic armor as well. I just think in terms of output, she's going to be less consistent and weaker than Alucia. So I'd probably actually rate her higher than Vargas and Emmerich, but lower than Alucia. And then you have 3 tanks and Altamüller, Hilda, and Albedo, and it's kind of hard to say which one is like truly the best tank. Now the thing with Altamüller is he doesn't rely on procs from skills or equipment for his damage reduction. He'll end up building stacks from his talent that at 5 stars he'll have 4 stacks of minus 5%. So that'll give him a 20%. You'll want to have him with his unique crown, which will make buffs that he provides himself last for 1 more turn. So that will basically allow his Raging Thunder to provide Wind Ride the last 3 turns, which will be like match the cooldown of the skill. So it will give him a permanent 15% damage reduction from Wind Ride.
Very nice.
So that'll put him at 35%. And then he can wear Blast Rights, which will put him at 75% damage reduction. And then once you add in Tensei Jessica or someone else using the Parasite, or not Parasite, Parasite's the skill effect called the Mistletoe Staff, that'll be an effective 95% damage reduction. And then with the 3C, that'll put him up at 120%, which should be enough to make him survive even the strong skill for a long, long time. The thing with Altamüller is he's got like more offensive soldier bonds, and he'll probably be best run with gargoyles. Actually, the thing with Altamüller is that he will be like higher DPS and offensive than the other 2 tanks, Hilda and Albedo, but he sort of provides less team support. And by that I mean, like, Albedo has Hellhounds to provide the damage support, and has this Attack Intimidate to provide a source of attack down. So I already sort of went over Albedo, so I'll cover Hilda. Now Hilda, the thing she has to offer is she will need to be wearing Spirit Boots, and she'll want Steel Enchant as well as Bloodline Armor. the thing that she offers in the fight is this Broken Spear passive that gives her a 15% attack increase in battle, but it will also inflict a very strong minus 25% attack debuff every time she attacks or gets attacked. So she offers team support in that way, where she offers a very strong attack debuff to the enemy. Besides that, she also gets to run this Broken Blade skill, which allows her to basically means you don't necessarily have to run Mistletoe on your Tensei Jess if you're bringing Hilda, because Hilda, using this skill, can actually provide the damage dealt debuff for those big skills on her own. And then finally, I would bring Heavy Shield just to have, another RNG chance of proccing something that will help her live.
Mm-hmm.
Her other skills aren't really that important. My Albedo lived for a long time without having to proc anything, so it might not be necessary to even run Heavy Shield. In which case, you could go Ram for a little bit of a stronger attack and maybe a bit of utility and being able to shove the boss around on the even turns. Or you could even, if you have a lot of Tensei characters, you could consider just bringing Faction Buff to see if the extra 12% on single target skills and counter attacks might actually be worthwhile. So it's sort of up to personal preference. You could go Heavy Shield just to play it safe. Ram to open up a little bit more opportunity for someone like Rosalia to attack if she doesn't have a skill up. Or you could just try to see if the faction buff will end up resulting in a higher damage output instead.
All things that Hilda players will have to test for themselves. See what's
it's
causing
kind
them
of
problems.
How each tank, basically, they serve the innate role of high damage reduction, but they each bring something different to the table. So Altamuller brings the highest DPS on his own because he has Raging Thunder, he has Gale for the chance of acting again. And with the sword, he's pretty self-sustaining, and he has higher damage troops. Hilda brings the strongest, attack down debuff. So, if you're using Altamuller, you would have to have someone else bring a source of attack down. But Hilda brings the attack down herself. But she doesn't bring, damage up. Albedo brings the damage up from the Hellhounds, but she has a smaller attack down. So it's kind of interesting how you have these tanks, and based on what the rest of you're bringing in your party, one of them might fulfill the roles that you're needing more than the others will. Now, there's one unit that I might actually consider a potential meta unit who would be worth replacing Leon with. And that is a single target DPS called Toguro Brothers. Now, the thing with Toguro Brothers is he doesn't have move again, so he will need to bring Spirit Boots. But you can't wear Spirit Boots on his Dark class, so you'd have to be running his Cav class, which has slightly lower base attack. The thing is, with his talent at 6 stars, it allows him to gain 2% per stack, and he'll gain 2 stacks every turn if he attacks. And his Cav Heart Bond, I believe, see if I can find him here. I mean, it is possible, just like Rosalia, to run him in his Dark class without Spirit Boots. but then you'd have to be able to like use Smash or Tensei Jess's teleport to like rescue him on the even phases. So it's sort of like a high risk, high reward. It will be higher damage output, but it won't be as safe, and it might require a bit more RNG to go in your favor. So I will mention it is possible to run him in that class, but it might end up going badly at some point. But his dark class, he has a damage taken reduction at 100% HP and a damage increase at 100% HP, which thanks to Rose and Seal is easy to maintain. So Leon's heart bonds don't actually really come into play because his are all like HP under 70% conditional, which is kind of hard to keep him down that low. You don't want him to be down that low. So Toguro Bros actually gets in the dark class like an innate damage reduction and damage bonus that Leon doesn't get. And his cavalry class also has the same effects: damage taken reduced by 10% and damage increased by 10%. The thing is, it requires 10 or more buffs and then it activates. But if you're using Rose and Seal, then like Miracle counts for 2 buffs. Rose and Seal's stacks count as buffs. So if you have 6-star Rose and Seal, if you just cast Miracle, that's already 5 buffs. You're going to get 2 buffs from Toguro's talent just by attacking the boss. So that'll get you up to 7. And then just by ending turn within Rose and Seal's field, he'll get another buff from another shield from Rose and Seal, the anti-debuff shields. So he already have 8 buffs after the first turn. The second turn, he'll gain 2 more buffs to get him at 10. And then from that point on, he will permanently have his heart bond effect active. So even though he doesn't have damage from talent like Leon does, he's not really that far behind in terms of damage anyway. And I'm speaking strictly about damage mods. Now, his increase in attack and skill is actually going to cap out at 30%. And if I were running him as Cav with Spirit Boots, I'd be running these 2 attack skills, Onrush and Finger Shot. And I would also be running Boost. And the big reason why I think Toguro Brothers could be stronger than Leon, even if I were running his Cav class instead of the Dark class, is because this attack and skill increase, as well as this boost passive, are going to make his troops and himself stronger than Leon is. So Leon is going to start out with a little bit of an advantage because he doesn't sort of have to build up his stacks over time. But towards the mid to late game, Toguro Brothers is going to end up having more damage output. So I think overall in the long run, if you have like a long running team that lasts a long time, like I forget how far my 18 million run lasted, but I think it was in the upper 60s to low 70s. Like by the time I died, the boss had over 8,000 attack. So I think in that case, having a 6-star Toguro Brothers would be actually a stronger option than Leon would be. All right. But again, I'm sure not many people actually have Toguro Brothers built. So in terms of general on-faction DPS, who I'd recommend, Illustrio, actually, if you have her with Oler's Bow and using Bone Dinos, she's actually a very respectable and powerful damage dealer in her own right. She's like a little bit below Leon and Rosalia, like she's not on that tier, but she's like just 1 tier beneath them, like in terms of DPS If you don't have Rosalia, like you have Leon, I would recommend actually Elestriel as like your other single target DPS very highly. Who else here is on faction? Luna does decent damage. I would be running her probably with her regular Wind Spiral to have lower cooldowns. Move again so she doesn't have to use Spirit Boots. And then the Raging Thunder skill. And also just with the nature of this fight, where you always want to move before attacking as much as possible, Heaven's Guard are going to be more powerful than Griffin Knights. So you'd want to run her with Heaven's Guard. Let's see. Knight of Mystery, I suppose you could use. She does have this one skill that allows her to move again, but it has a cooldown on it, which is not ideal. You could bring these two single target skills, and this one single target skill is ranged, so you could use it on the even phase. The issue with Knight of Mystery is well, generally she kind of has that issue where I guess she'd be sort of on the same level as Elestriel in terms of damage output. Her problem is that she's going to run into the same issue Rosalia runs into sometimes, where like you'll need a teleport or a smash or something to rescue her, and there may end up just being a situation where you don't have any skills to be able to get her out of a bind, so you have to just not attack with her at all.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I rate Elestriel higher than Knight of Mystery, because Elestriel can always attack from a corner from 2 range with Oler's bow and still deal great damage without ever having to worry about needing to be rescued. I guess there is Laneford as another DPS to talk about. Laneford, he does bring a nice 15% aura, which is slightly stronger than Rosalia's sword, so if you don't have Rosalia, you could also consider using him. He does have Shiv, he has a 2-range attack in Javelin, and you can also bring Roar for an attack debuff. That lasts a couple turns. So this is how I'd outfit Laneford. He is definitely usable in this fight. It's just that Rosalia's sword healing and her damage output outclass him. So I used to use him in Sleipnir, but he just ended up getting replaced. But if you have him but not Rosalia, he is definitely a good option to consider. For on-faction healers, both Florentia and Weiler leave a lot to be desired. The issue is that they don't really have consistent, strong healing every turn for the AoE. So I might run him with something like this and just have to alternate between Dispel and Mass Heal every turn. The issue is like his int and his healing isn't necessarily the highest, and having to use Dispel, it's only a 1.5 times int heal. Like, he just doesn't have enough healing, and Florentia runs in the same issue, so I don't recommend them as healers at all. If you don't have Rosalia, basically you're limited to one other option for good healing, and that's going to be Iris. She's going to want to run Mass Heal and her Dolly skill, and she'll need Teddy Bear to extend the length of the Dolly skill buff. Teddy Bear does not work with her 3C, and her 3C has a long cooldown, so it's slightly unfortunate. Like, it might be possible for you to use both 3C and Mass Heal, or, 3C and the teleport. I haven't really tested it because I've had Rosen Seal now. But this might be better than bringing Mass Heal, but just even this set, it works okay for healing. It's not nearly as good as what Rosenseal provides, but you'll want plushie on her. Probably a healing staff of some sort as well. And also, for survivability, a lot of people also combined her with Olivier. Now, Olivier is kind of a DPS, but he didn't really provide much DPS to the fight. What they used to use him for was Roaring Bomb. This one. Yeah, they used him for Roaring Bomb to provide this damage dealt debuff. And then they also used Excitation to help out with a little bit of healing. Because Iris still struggled to keep up with healing in this fight. Like, Rosenseal was a big change when she came out, because she can handle the healing all by herself, especially when you add in Rosalia's sword. But if you don't have Rosalia or Rosenseal, you're probably going to run the combo of Olivier and Iris to help with the healing and damage dealt debuffing. But the scores with Rosenseal are way, way higher. So if you look at some of the scores down here, they were done with old parties using Iris and Olivier, and they're all like, the upper limit is around 10 million or so. And then once people started using Rosenseal, like, the damage increased quite a bit. Like, this is 3 million higher than down here. And then is really the damage dealt debuff from Mistletoe being applied every turn from Tensei Jess. That enabled me to get up to 18 million.
It's quite a jump.
I think I've seen some big whale, like on the main Discord, have Hilda as their tank, and they end up with a run that hit 20 million, I think. So I'm definitely going to be looking into her once I get her up to 6 stars. But still, I think 18 million is a really good score.
Definitely.
And it's just a case of, which of the three, like Altmuller or Albedo or Hilda, that you have built up. And then basically what they're lacking, you can look for to add in from someone else. So, like, if you don't have Albedo, maybe you could try using Overstaff, like on a Rosalia or even Tensei Jess, to potentially provide that extra damage debuff. Or if you have Altamuller, then you're kind of lacking an attack debuff, so maybe you would bring someone who could bring attack down, like maybe even Altamuller himself. Maybe you would use a Last Night on Altamuller to provide a good chance to get a 20% attack debuff that way. So it's kind of like you build your team to fill in these certain roles, and then your tank kind of helps out with those roles and determines what's best for the rest of your team to bring.
Right. There's one tank that you didn't mention that I know used to get used more commonly.
Are you talking about Liana or Hein?
Or Hein, yes.
I didn't really mention those because that's like so old. That was like back in, that was like a level 60 strat.
Right.
I also could mention that people actually used to use Leonhardt and Teddy Bear to have 2 turns of an extra 30% damage reduction. So, like, if you want to do that, you can. I just thought it was kind of a meme strat, and it's
Welfare
not
strats
really
now.
optimal if you're going for high scores. I guess it works if you're going for S.
Mm-hmm.
The basic idea is that you have Shrine Maidens on Hein or Liana to provide this 75% damage reduction, and then you give them like a steel enchant. You could probably also give them the SR amulet for an extra 10% damage reduction. So that would put like Hein at 95% damage reduction. And then you can give the boss a debuff. Like you could be running the staff to give the damage dealt debuff like on your tank in that case.
It's just funny and creative that that was a possible option.
Yeah, that was a possible option. I think also with Liana, there were times that they used the Sky Archer summon to tank a skill.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, good. I almost forgot about Helena. Helena is another interesting DPS that I wanted to mention. She has no innate move again, so she does have to wear spirit boots. The thing that's interesting with her is that as a DPS, she's sort of flexible in the sense where she can fill in a spot that you may need. So her 3C will reduce damage dealt by the boss by 30%, which is stronger than the 20% you get with the other effects. So you could save her 3C if you need to have a damage reduction from, like, say you're using like her instead of Leon. That would free up, say, Tensei Jess. Instead of using Mistletoe, she could use an actual attack staff and have more damage.
Mm-hmm.
And then you could rely on this 3C skill to be able to provide a big damage dealt reduction when those big hits are coming. But if you don't need that, you could also bring this interesting 2C skill, which has the effect of increasing the damage taken by 30%. So, like if you're using Hilda or Altamuller and you don't have the Hellhounds, Helena could provide a consistent. Well, it has a 5-round long-term cooldown, so you might actually want to run her with Clock Enchant. But Helena could actually provide the damage taken debuff, and quite a strong one on the boss for you instead. And then, like, she could be running Petal Storm to do a little bit of AoE damage and have a small chance of reducing a random stat by 25%. Or if you like, you could just go Attack Break and have her be your potential source of attack down that way. So she's interesting as a potential DPS that way. And something else I want to mention with her. So I'm just gonna... She's not really geared or built up all that well, but I'm just gonna take her into the fight just to show her something else that she can do. Right? So I'll just take her steadily on. Her best troops are bone dinos, by the way. Now, the thing that she can do is on these odd phases. I mentioned before about how the more tiles you move, the more damage you deal. The thing she can do is she can do Chivalry, and then her tiles run back along them and have, like, a lot of move before attacking. So I mentioned I'm not sure if this boss has, like, a cap on how many tiles you move for the damage increase, but I'm not aware of one, so... Like, it's possible for you to position her where she can get an extremely high amount of damage dealt. So, like, here she's 3 away, so I could literally run all the way out here. Use Chivalry. Oh, it didn't include the starting tile, so I messed up. Alright, I'm just going to use Tensei just to fix this. So I guess you'd have to start in this spot. But she can run away and use chivalry. Now she has the potential to move 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 tiles before attacking for a potential 140% damage boost.
Oh,
so
yeah.
you saw that was almost 140k damage, even though her gear is not really built up and she's only 4 stars. So she was doing the same damage as Rosalia was doing with her skill doing with 2800 attack, and she only had 2200 attack. So that is another interesting thing she brings to the table. Now, I'm not certain that she's going to be quote unquote better than Leon or Toguro brothers.
Mm-hmm.
But she's another instance where you can have her as a flex unit where she can bring in the damage dealt debuff or the damage taken debuff to slot in one of those roles that your rest of your party might not be covering. Ares, I guess, as a DPS, you might have him built, but his he can bring Fearless Hurricane, I guess, to give him a little bit extra move for attacking, as well as lightning. The thing with him is that his talent is based on having a lot of enemies within range, and in this fight you only have the one, so you're not really benefiting from his talent so much. So that's kind of holds him back a bit from being a really great DPS. But of course, you could always end up with his 3C also taking advantage of the whole moving a lot of tiles before attacking thing. It didn't have the defense down or anything on the boss, and that was quite a good attack. So I guess he is usable. I just think that he's not as good as, say, Leon, Rosalia, Helena et al. Now, one of the issues with Ares on this phase in particular that makes them worse is he will move through. So if this had been Leon, he'd be moving 4 and getting 80% damage buff. But here he's only moving 2 and getting a 40% damage buff because he moves through. So that's one of the things that makes him a subpar DPS. All right, so he gets to move again. Okay, now it shows it. Now he has cooldown trigger. So I guess if you use his 3C, he's able to move through, and then he'll be able to do it again the next turn. The thing is, you kind of want to save his 3C if you're using him to benefit from the maximum damage you can get on this odd phase. So he doesn't really get to benefit as much of it on the even phase. But this is just one thing I did want to mention is it's not every turn, but this skill does allow him to attack on the even phase and be able to retreat without relying on spirit boots. So if you are going to use him, I think you should bring a full-on attack accessory instead. But I think that covers Ares. Let's check if there's any other potential interesting DPS in here. Mariel, I guess she is on faction. I didn't really think about her too much. She doesn't have move again, so again, another unit that will have to have spirit boots. I imagine her best troops would be either zealots or Highland warriors. Thing is, she does have self-healing act again and a couple of decent effects on her skills, like this attack Once she's attacked, it will deal 1.4 times damage, and it will push the target back, so she'll be able to move the boss around. Her 3C has a very high cooldown, which I kind of don't like. But it does deal 1.8 times damage. She could, interestingly enough, if you don't have Lanford or Rosalia, she could bring attack command as like a general aura buff for the rest of your team. Or if you do, maybe you could just bring boost or attack support L to provide some damage buffs to the rest of your team. Let's see. Maya's not very good. Ashram, you could also potentially use. He's, once again, just another case of a unit without move again who's going to need spirit boots. Now, the thing with Ashram is technically, if you brought his 3C, he could be able to spam it every single turn. The issue is, once you get to the even phase, he's not going to be able to keep his 3C because he's going to have to move away to not be in a direct line from the boss.
Mm-hmm.
So then he'll lose the ability to spam it over and over. Now, if I were to bring Ashram, I'd probably actually consider bringing Shadow Assault for the attack down debuff, Smash to push the boss around. And then I would probably start off with Decimate, which will turn into a Counter Strike after you use it. And because you'll never be killing anything, it will only be like a one-time use to get this attack, defense, and critical hit rate aura. But I think it's better to have that than to start out with Thunderstrike. So that's how I'd have him. That's how I'd have his skills. He does get Bone Dinos, which is nice. And his talent increases attack for each block he moves. And his defense increases quite a bit, so he'll be pretty tanky and survivable. You can throw Last Rites on him, so he won't be too worried about dying to the AoE. So I think he's going to be sort of in the class like Illustriel, where it's like not quite as top tier as someone like Leon, but he's going to be pretty high damage output, honestly. The thing is, unlike Illustriel, he'll have to wear Spirit Boots, so he'll be slightly worse. But if you do happen to have him built and you somehow don't have the other options built, then he'll be a decent choice as well. As far as other characters here, I haven't really thought about Noemi much. I guess Noemi would be usable. Her 3C does give her a certain amount of damage increase. But she also provides this like magic garments buff that's going to be only a one-time thing. And honestly, your characters are going to be staying like above 80% HP for the most part due to Rosalia and Rosenseal. So this is only going to kick in once your team has started falling apart. And it may actually help you survive yet one more turn once that point comes later on. But I don't think she'll be that great. Like, she doesn't have much innate damage up, and ranged characters honestly have a hard time attacking and moving the maximum number of tiles that they can. It's just that the damage buff that you get from moving the tiles really emphasizes bringing 5 move characters over 3 move characters. Sakura, if you happen to want to use Sakura, there's actually a funny thing that you could do. Where, she has Bone Dino, so that would be her best choice. But if you were bringing Sakura, she would need Spirit Boots, but you could bring... Oh, I don't actually have her 3C. But you could go clock with her and bring her 3C and use her 3C and hope you clock it multiple times in a row to build up her talent stacks. Because she will get a talent stack each time you use it. And at 6 stars, she'll be able to stack up 4 times, and it'll be 10% for each stack. So it'll be a potential, 40% all stats increase, which is going to be pretty nice, both for her and her Bone Dinos. Then for her other skills besides her 3C, you could bring Smash, again, to push the boss around, and then you could bring Roar to decrease the boss's attack. Or if you really felt you needed it, you could use this skill to increase the boss's damage taken by 30% to increase the rest of your team's. Wait, actually, no. If you bring 3C, you could only bring one of these two.
One or the other, yeah.
So if you were to bring 3C and that, then you could bring this Deathmatch passive to increase her attack and skill. Her attack and crit rate while in battle. So that's probably how I would run her if I were using Sakura. See, Sonya is another unit who can bring Hellhounds for the damage debuff, which is what I would be doing if I were to use her. Her issue is that her HP is so low. She's just so frail that she's going to die early, unfortunately. So she may actually be worthwhile still using if you have her as an option and don't have many of the other top tier DPS units built up. Just for the Hellhound debuff alone, it could help you get your score up pretty quickly early on, guys. Let's see. Layla is, if you're going to use Layla, maybe you don't have Rosalia or Lanford, you could bring Layla as the attack command buff. And she could replace what I was doing with Tensei Jess with the Mistletoe. She'd actually be a good user of the Mistletoe staff. And you'd be pretty much using her with this layout. And you could also bring these spiders to have a good chance to inflict magic defense down, which would also help any other mage DPS you may be bringing along. So in terms of mages, I do like Layla more than Noemi for that flexibility and team support. And of course, she also helps with healing, which is probably pretty crucial, actually, if you don't have Rosenseal, especially. I think that basically covers it in terms of interesting DPS you can use, or effective DPS. So I think that does it in terms of units.
Sounds good. Lots of options.
Yeah, this boss is interesting the way it has lots of options and a sort of open, so to speak, meta with the 3 different tanks you can choose from.
Right.
That are all kind of top tier in their own way. Hey, Kong.
Hey.
I'm here with a little update on Toguro Brothers. I wanted to update some people as to my thoughts. I have determined that they are definitely better than Leon. And
no maybe about it anymore.
Actually, this skill here, his transform skill, the thing you can do with this that's really funny is that it gives him a revive. So if you save this for Sleipnir's even phase, you can actually just leave him in a straight line right next to the boss, and the Sleipnir's going to attack him. And because he revives, Sleipnir doesn't do anything after that. So you can literally have him tank a hit and do some extra counter damage. And that's going to improve your output. Also, it sort of provides a safety net later on, because when you can no longer take out the boss in just a couple turns, you might end up having to deal with someone being hunted that you don't want hunted. Well, in that case, you can have this transform saved for that situation. And then when you leave Toguro next to the boss, Sleipnir's going to ignore the hunted character and just go for Toguro. And once he kills Toguro and Toguro revives, he just stays there. He doesn't do anything.
Sneaky.
So that's just a little update on Toguro I wanted to provide for... I think I was a little bit too ambivalent about which one I thought was better. I definitely think Toguro's better now.
So it's the kind of sneaky straight line revive that really tips the scales, I guess? Because I think you had said, or actually I remember since it was only a few minutes ago, you did say that Toguro would out-damage Leon, but now this kind of gives you just an extra tool in your toolbox.
He would out-damage Leon for sure, but this provides not just extra damage, but like extra utility as well.
Right, exactly.
So anyway,
the downside
I did
is
have
that he's rarer.
Yeah, I mean, Leon is still great if you don't have Toguro. But anyway, would you perhaps like to talk about some things coming in the future?
Sure, yeah. What has Professor Q got on his plate?
Well, there's a new unit that's coming. It's going to be quite a long ways for us, but I am salivating to use this unit in Sleipnir. She's called Lucretia. She's going to be the highest damage DPS for the fight. She has pretty high damage in her talent. She has a 30% damage talent. And she has two classes, both of them with the same int. So we can pick the tankier class, which is going to be the hermit class, I believe. The big thing with her is that her 3-cost skill is completely overtuned. It's a 1.6 times damage attack. And before battle, it inflicts all stats minus 30%. So attack, defense, magic defense. It's really, really powerful. Now, you think a skill like that would have a long cooldown, right? Nope, it's only 3 turns.
Wow.
It's so overtuned. I would still be running Clock and Dimensional Jewel just to spam it as much as possible.
Right.
But it's a really powerful 3C. Also, she can bring a Dark Reaper. And did I mention that she has a summon?
She does have her creepy marionette creature.
Yeah, she automatically summons a puppet at the start of the fight. And she has a 1C skill she can bring where after she attacks the boss, it will have... the little puppet will have like a 50% damage taken decrease and a 30% damage increase. So if you combine that with the mistletoe damage debuff, it's going to be a consistent 70% damage reduction that the puppet will have when it attacks, which means that the puppet will be able to attack for quite a while into the fight without risking dying.
Right, that was going to be my first question anytime a summon is involved, is how durable is it going to be against a super boss?
Well, it does inherit her max stats
at
the start of each turn, I believe. Which, if I'm reading it correctly, means that if she ends her turn within Rosalia's sword, then the summon stats will update the next turn to reflect that extra 10% as well. So its stats, I don't think its stats will be stuck at the level it was when the fight starts, so to speak.
Yeah, that sounds like a ridiculous character to use.
The other thing about her, is because she's a ranged DPS, and she's going to be replacing someone else that's going to be likely a melee unit, that actually helps open up the positioning for your other melee units against Sleipnir. Like, you know, when it does the big suck-in and AoE,
right,
and sometimes your people end up in odd positions. It means that she will have an easier time clearing a space out for some other DPS to move the maximum number of tiles to get the max damage increase that they can. So I am super, super excited for Lucretia here.
So maybe immediately after us talking up Toguro Bros, he's going to get replaced by her?
Well, about that. Now, at one point, I did mention that there were 3 sort of meta tanks, and it was kind of hard to know which one was best.
That's right.
Turns out there's a 4th tank who's actually more meta than any of those 3.
Oh, this must be a brand new, shiny new character that's coming out?
Yes, actually. His name is Bernhardt's 3C. So, we don't have it yet. But what's going to happen is once Bernhardt gets his 3C, and he has Iron Fist equipped, his 3C faction buff will give him minus 25% physical damage taken. That's going to put his damage reduction on par with Albedo.
Okay.
Now, in my experience, let me talk about my experience with Albedo. I was living with her into the mid-70s, taking the big skills. With the Mistletoe proc and Tiny Jess's 3C providing the extra buff, she was surviving just fine without any triggers of her 3C, without block, even without bloodline. So theoretically, I was thinking I was going to change my Albedo over to a mirror armor that would increase her DPS. But I realized if you don't need any of those things to trigger, like not only can you like improve Albedo by not running those skills and like running an attack skill, it means you can run Burn as your tank too. And what that's going to do with Burn taking over the tank role, he still provides his own role, his old role in the fight of being like the stat debuffer who does some damage. And he arguably becomes stronger with his 3C than his old role was. Because his 3C, it gives him a number of buffs, one of which is 15% damage dealt and an 18% damage dealt increase that goes to him and to his allies. So he'll also be buffing the damage of, say, Lucretia, who is an Empire, by the way, so she gets to benefit from that. And it'll benefit your Leon or your Toguro as well. And essentially that's going to result in him having, instead of this plus 20% damage, he'll have like plus 53% damage. So that means on the odd phase as a tank, he's actually going to be dealing some decent counter damage as well, because that counters the whole minus 60% damage that phase has. Another big thing that it does for him is it will give him 4 movement after he uses it. So, you know, after those warp phases I talk about where the boss warps everyone in, his burn is like straight across from the boss. Beforehand, he could only move 2 tiles to attack, so he only gets plus 40% damage. But now, you could theoretically be able to clear up a spot, and he can move a full 4 tiles, and that will be like a 40% damage increase over what he used to be able to do when he goes to attack.
And this is all over and above the obvious benefit, which is just that if Bernhardt is essentially doing 2 jobs, the Bernhardt job and the tank job, you have a whole extra slot free for another DPS.
Yes, that's actually kind of interesting how that's happened in this fight twice now. Because first we had Olivier and Iris, and sort of both their roles got merged into Rosenseal.
Right.
And now we have Bernhardt coming up in his 3C, which is going to basically do the same thing with Burn and the tank role. So I think if you are running him as tank, I should point out the gear I was using on Albedo. You absolutely want HP. Like that's what I've been rolling this gear for, is you can see 15% HP here. When I first fought Sleipnir and got my current score, this actually had 5% HP, and I re-rolled it to hit 9% HP, and it has some defense and attack.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the thing is, Burn's stats will be a little bit lower than Albedo's, but because I have re-rolled these things to be a little bit higher than they used to, that's actually going to make up the difference. And I believe he's actually going to be able to survive with Lucretia bringing that 3C to have that extra potent attack down. He'll actually be able to survive with the steel crystal stinger. So it might sound crazy, but I'm actually building a steel crystal stinger with a focus on max HP. So eventually Burn is going to end up geared like this.
So needing almost perfect HP enchants and possibly frivolous extra crystal stingers might make this a little bit out of reach of most players.
Well, if you don't want to have super high tier enchants, you might be able to get away with, instead of using crystal stinger, you could use a hammer. So these don't have any attack bonus, but presumably you might have one of these Oath of Justices with a steel enchant.
Right.
It has high base HP, and it has some defense bonus, so you could just give him that. And then
is this mathed out using his Brave class or his Emperor class?
Now, if you use Brave class, you have almost the same stats as Albedo. You end up with the base HP is like 101 less, and your base defense is like 6 less. So it's not a very big difference. These crazy enchants I'm doing are so that I can actually run his Emperor class, his DPS class, and use the Crystal Stinger as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that means there is a little bit of room to breathe if you can't get Professor Qtaru level enchants. You can make little adjustments elsewhere to make up for it.
Yes, I will note that, I was saying the Bloodline proc was not needed for Albedo. So having a Bloodline does give you that little bit of a safety net. I mean, it is RNG.
Mm-hmm.
But I do want to talk a little bit about gear, because the proc isn't needed, so you could go mirror armor for like max DPS, because the fixed damage hit when it attacks Burn. But something else that I think could be interesting is actually because he uses these steel main troops, and they do some healing up after battle. It might actually be best to run him with let's see here. I think Len has mine. Yeah. It might actually be best to run him with Aeneas armor. I mean, you're losing a little bit of HP from not having the HP plus 5%. But this extra healing means that his troops are going to heal back more. And he's also going to get more healing from Rosenseal. So it might actually be really helpful to have him with Aeneas armor, because maybe it means his troops will heal up more after combat. So when you start the phase, maybe he'll have an extra troop or two that you wouldn't have had if you were using a different armor. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I suspect these are all things that are going to be meticulously tested by Professor Q when the time comes.
Oh, I'm excited. I just wish it wasn't months away.
Yeah.
But anyway, once we get Burns 3C, I'm gonna test with unfortunately my Toguro is still 5 stars. I just started working on him. He's like 3 out of 150 right now. But I want to try a run using both Toguro and Leon before Lucretia comes out.
Okay.
And see what that looks like.
Right.
And then once Lucretia comes out, I think her 3C just being so overtuned, I think it's actually might turn Sleipnir into the boss with the highest damage ceiling, potentially.
Okay.
Like right now, the damage ceilings on like Jormungandr, Hugin, and Munin are technically can be up to around 25, 26 million. I mean, it's bold to say it, but I could see Sleipnir getting that high, if not higher.
I look forward to that day.
When you think about it, we used to have these runs of Sleipnir that were like 10 or 11 million, and they were using Iris and Olivier.
Yep.
And once that got merged down into Rosenseal, scores jumped up by like 8 million or so.
Using my guild leader as the example of the old-fashioned runs. Sorry, Johnny.
I know who your guild leader is now. But I'm thinking, like, with the ability to merge Burn and Albedo into one slot here, I could see that being another 8 million jump potentially.
That's going to be mind-blowing.
Yeah, I'm excited. And I think that about covers everything.
Well, thanks for sharing all of your insights on Sleipnir. And thanks for showing us a couple cycles of how it actually works, too, because that is a boss where it's fairly dynamic and you have to kind of do separate stuff in terms of positioning during each phase, so it's good to see that in action.
Thank you very much, everyone, for watching. This has been kind of a long one, but there's lots of units we could go over, and there's a good bit of strategy to the fight as well.
Yeah, lots of moving parts. So thanks for coming on again to teach us all the ins and outs. Alright, so that concludes our video on Sleipnir. Please join me once again in the comments in thanking Professor Qtaru for that amazingly detailed and thorough lesson. As you can tell, he just can't ever stop thinking about Ancient Beckoning, so he keeps coming back with new information that he wants to share. I know it might not seem like it, but we both did put a lot of hard work into this episode, and the series as a whole. I don't usually do this in my other videos, but I do hope you'll consider liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and maybe even clicking the join button for more information on the perks of channel membership. Thanks again so much for watching, I hope you took something valuable from this, and we hope you'll be back for the next lesson. Happy leaderboarding, everyone!